Welcome, everyone, and hi. I know. I'm Joe Witkowski, and I'm coming to you from New Orleans, and I am very lucky to be here as a representative of Shandon. And I have been asked to talk about a few things that Shandon and the Moet Hennessy Moet USA, you can see that beautiful at for the Instagram and all the social medias. So lots of great things are going on through Shandon, who has hired me, and then the Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy group. One of the first things I'd like to talk about is I last year was really lucky to be part of the Proud Bartenders project, and there were 6 of us from all across the country, all different ethnicities, backgrounds, gender identities. We all were assigned a color of the Pride rainbow, and to come up with a cocktail for that, I'm the purple, and that was spirit, and my drink was all about healing yourself, because I think one of the most important things is you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. So that was what that cocktail was about. One of the cool things is myself and 2 other bartenders from that project, Al Utt and Karina Martinez, have been asked to come back again and do a cocktail courier kit. And that will be available, cocktailcourier.com. It is the Pride kit. There are 3 drinks. One is going to be Belvedere vodka. One is Glenmorangie. And then I am making a Shandon cocktail again because I like things effervescent, like this beautiful sparkly top. One of the cool things we're doing with this group is we are presenting to the Moet Hennessy's USA. They have an employee resource group known as The Bar, which is open to all, but it is really focusing on creating a safe space in the wine and spirits industry around LGBTQIA plus life and how do we take care of each other. And in a few weeks, we will be doing an internal Zoom call that is hosted by one of my favorite drag queens, Monet Exchange. So I'm like fangirling all over that. But it's really cool. And I'm really proud to have asked to have been part of this project for Shandon twice now. And it's just something it's really important to me as an out queer brown bartender that being visible is really key, because if I'm present, that shows people that they can be present. And speaking of present, because anytime I get to spend with Amie Ward is a present, Amie is here on behalf of Safe Bars. She's the Healthtender. She's amazing. Amie, what is Safe Bars, and can you tell me more about what we're doing today?
Heck yes. Thank you so much, Joe. It is also always a pleasure to be with you too. You are my confidant in jumpsuits. We have a sheer fond for just wearing onesies at all times, whenever possible. It's freeing. As long as it has pockets, it's even better. I love it. So my name is Amie Ward. I go by she, her pronouns. I not only am the Healthtender, where I work on trying to provide wellness and health resources for the hospitality industry, but I am also a instructor and facilitator for Safe Bars and have been for the last 3 years. And what Safe Bars is a prevention program that helps to teach people in bars and restaurants how to safely intervene in situations that happen in your bar to prevent harm from happening. And before we go any further, I just want to take a moment to kind of let everybody that's tuning in, that's watching us right now, know that today we're going to be talking about some topics that can be upsetting. And I want to make sure that everybody is able to take care of themselves in the process. If you need to step away, that's fine. These things are going to be recorded, so if you ever want to come back to it, you can watch it again. But the topics we're going to be talking about today will include discussions about aggression, harassment, sexual violence, and that is very upsetting for a lot of people. And there are many survivors around you. So I want to encourage people either to just practice the best self-care for them, whether that is doing some grounding activities such as putting your feet on the floor, standing up for a stretch, taking a breath, taking a glass of water, or just leaving the room. Please do that. Please, first and foremost, take care of yourself before we go any further. And if anybody ever wants to reach out to me and ask other questions, they're more than welcome to if they choose not to go through the entire programming. And I want to make sure that we just create this space that feels like we're being really upfront about what we're talking about, and everybody knows that they have the option to participate, not participate, anything like that. So thank you for letting me do that part. But Safe Bars. So what is Safe Bars? Safe Bars is a nonprofit organization that's based out of DC. It was created in 2013 by Lauren Taylor, who is my boss. And it's a prevention program that, again, promotes healthy bar environments and works to reduce harm through active bystander intervention. So today, what we're going to be doing, Dave, if you want to pop up the second slide, maybe. Yeah. So after that, so this is taking pride in safety. We are very fortunate to have Sean and Moa Hennessy, Moa USA people sponsoring all this and bringing the Safe Bars teams in to do this PDX programming. So I'm super grateful for that. We talked a little bit about what the self-care is. We're talking a little bit about what Safe Bars is. And now it's time to talk about bystanders. So what is I mentioned bystander intervention. A bystander is a person who is present during any kind of event, but they do not take any action in the event. And this does not have to be a negative event. It could be a positive event. You could be an innocent bystander, right? So there's a lot of different things in which a bystander means. Being an active bystander means that you are able to safely intervene in any situation in an effort to create, and in our case, create a culture of safety and respect for staff and patrons alike. So within our Safe Bars community, we actually go out and train other bar communities to become Safe Bars instructors on their own. I believe at this point we have about 25 different groups across the US that we have trained up, anywhere from Alaska to, it doesn't matter. It's all over the place. People are very much concerned and wanting to create these good, hospitable, welcoming places for their bars and restaurants. So we've been able to go out there and train these different groups up to lead their own communities of Safe Bars teams. In the DC area, we currently have 11 active instructors, including myself. Most of them are all in the hospitality industry as well. We find that having a combination of people in the hospitality industry and those who work in victim or survivor advocacy is a really good combination of two different levels of expertise. So when you go into bars and restaurants, we can talk about these really important topics and have people lending their own, real great brains to both situations. So we're going to talk a little bit about today about social norms and sexual violence, barriers to intervention skills. We're going to go over and touch on just a little bit of what we actually do teach in the Safe Bars training. And then we'll go through a whole list of different ways in which you can make your bars and restaurants a welcoming and inclusive space all the time. And while this is part of Pride programming, this is something that we want to ensure that you are doing all the time. This is not just for the month of June. You should actively be working to create welcoming, inclusive spaces that are safe for patrons and staff all the time, right? So hands down, all the time, non-argument for that. Okay, so let's talk about social norms. So preventing sexual harassment or assault in bars and restaurants, both public and private, they also often involve disrupting common social norms. And I think that might be the next, let's pop to the next slide. This is like very rarely that I will read off of slides, but this is kind of important. And when we do our trainings, this is one of the things that we say. So why is Safe Bars important? Research has shown that the environment around an aggressor can make a difference in their behavior and help prevent sexual harassment and assault. And bar and restaurant staff are in the perfect position to establish safe, respectful, and welcoming environments where these behaviors are not tolerated. And I don't feel like that requires too much explanation, but you're the eyes. You see everything, you hear everything. You're in a prime position to be able to scan an entire room, understand who is sitting where, what's going on. You know how to gauge the temperature in your own space. And you are the person as a bartender that gets to create this environment and create that fun time, that happy time, that whatever time for the people that step into your bars and restaurants. We are primed to be able to really see everything and kind of set the expectations for the rest of the night. So that's why it's super important. There's something else we'll get to in just a little bit where the role of alcohol is really important in this as well, where alcohol is involved in about 50% of all aggression, sexual aggression and sexual violence cases. And that's not to say that alcohol causes these actions. They absolutely do not. But people who are aggressors use alcohol as an excuse for their behavior or as a way to incapacitate people. And that's why we as bartenders and people in the restaurant industry have that extra ability to really step in and intervene before things get out of control. Now, it absolutely is normal for people to feel hesitation when they want to speak up or thinking about intervention. And you might be feeling some kind of panic just by thinking, how am I going to do this? What's going on? I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to make anybody's night bad. And that's fine. Like, this is all going to be non-confrontational things. And I want to explain a little bit about why you might feel that hesitation in addition to your own like personal anxieties, whatever they may be going through right now. And I totally feel everybody for that. So social norms, according to research, there are 5 key social norms that support sexual violence. That includes a cultural violence that we have within our own society. Narrow and toxic definitions of masculinity definitely make a lot of the violence and aggression be able to perpetuate and prevent people from talking about it as well. There are limited roles for women, which is certainly changing, but it's when we're talking about where the aggression is usually targeted to, this can play into it. And power and control is such a thing that is valued. Anytime we talk about instances of aggression or violence, it's committed generally by someone who feels that they are in a position of power over the person that they are targeting, whether that is power by way of gender, by sexual orientation, by race, by ethnicity, whatever it might be. The people who commit those acts see their target as someone in a lower power position than them. So because that power is valued, that allows those kind of, it becomes a barrier to entry, it becomes a barrier to us stepping up, and it's what allows sexual violence to continue. There's also the value of privacy and silence. Most people probably, the immediate feeling when I'm like, we're gonna talk about bystander intervention, they're like, whoa, I was taught to like not cause a scene, like it's not my business, stay out of it. Like the value of privacy and silence is something that definitely prevents people from stepping in and also allows this kind of situation, these acts of aggression to continue on. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Barriers to intervention. So we talked about social norms that allow sexual violence to perpetuate in our society. There's also these different barriers to stepping up. So when we reflect on what we're asking people to do, which is to step up and do something when they see a problematic situation, it's important to acknowledge that this is very difficult. Even Joe and I, who have very similar loud personalities and have no problem like I talk to strangers on a regular basis.
Yep.
Right? There's still that barrier, and there's a lot of different things that come into play for it. And it's different for everybody. It's very personal. All of them are okay as barriers, but it's important to kind of dissect them so you can understand what might be preventing you from speaking up and speaking out. It's really important to know that it's okay if you think that this is difficult. This is why we teach the skills, so you can feel more empowered to find a intervention skill that works for you and step up. So it also can be really difficult when we're looking at bars and restaurants where the dynamics of harassment happen everywhere. It can happen between patron and staff. It can be staff to patron. It can be patron to patron. And it can also be staff to staff. So not all of us feel comfortable speaking up when we see something happening between coworkers, perhaps, or strangers that have walked into your bar. So all of these things can influence your likeliness to intervene, and that's totally okay, but let's break them down. So the first one that's listed there is diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility means that we are more likely to help if we're by ourselves. If we see a bunch of other people around us, if we're in an environment where there's a large crowd, hence what we do on a regular basis as bartenders, we're increasingly less likely to help someone when there's more people around because each person will believe that somebody else is taking care of that, right? So diffusion of responsibility. The next one, and feel free to stop me anytime you want to talk about any of these things, Joe, if you do.
I also think sometimes diffusion of responsibility, especially if you're looking at it from staff to staff or patron to staff, is, well, my manager can handle that, or I can't. I don't have the role of authority. Let someone else take care of it. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely, those are all things that do come up. And that's a little bit later when we talk about like what else you can do in your bars and restaurants. Making clear-cut guidelines, workplace guidelines, and setting an example as the person who is the leader in your bar is super important for the rest of your people to be able to see that they are supported in the actions that they take. They're supported if they report. They're supported if they intervene. That's all really important to set from the top down. So whomever your boss is, whomever your owner is, whoever your lead is, needs to be able to vocalize that that's okay for everybody to be able to have a voice and step in. And if you don't want to step in, that's also fine. You also know the channels that you can go to and go through if you personally just don't want to do that. And that's fine, because when your personal ethics, your safety, your values all come into play, that is first and foremost, you always have to take care of you.
Yep.
Which you said earlier, before you can go forth and do anything for anybody else. The next one is evaluation apprehension. So we might not be able to step up if we're worried about being embarrassed if the situation turns out to be problematic, or even if it doesn't turn out to be problematic. There's a lot of embarrassment of like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to cause a scene. I don't want to do anything. And that's why we reiterate that these are going to be non-confrontational things. You're going to notice that a lot of the examples that I give in a little bit when we go through the particular skills are things you say on a normal basis as a bartender. So it's just trying to lather, rinse, repeat, put this kind of dialogue into your normal day-to-day and be comfortable knowing that it's an intervention skill. And that'll make a little bit more sense when we start getting to specific examples. This is another thing where people just don't trust their gut. They're afraid of making a scene, not having something be private, causing some kind of mess to unfold. But your gut is super, super important. I know this is at the bottom, but the cost of checking in is relatively zero. Yep. The cost of not checking in or saying something can potentially be deadly. So if that grumpy little person that lives in your belly says, I don't like it one bit, then we need to start to honor that person who is not actually grumpy. They're very intuitive. They live inside your gut, and they want you to know that they're there for you because they see things that you can't see. I've named the little person that lives in my gut, apparently.
I mean, don't we all?
Yes. So pluralistic ignorance is the next one. That's like if we're not sure if the situation's a problem. So we look around at others to see how they're responding. And if they aren't reacting, then we don't. But that doesn't, as we all know, all these different barriers play in, and people might be experiencing them at the same time. So we can't rely on the other reactions of people in order to make an effort to intervene. Cause of misfortune. This is really important because a lot of the reasons why violence and aggression, sexual violence and aggression is allowed to perpetuate, and because a lot of people don't report when things happen, is because there are myths that are associated with if somebody that somebody might be responsible for their own misfortune. That's what cause of misfortune means. So we're less likely to help somebody if we perceive that the person is responsible for this own misfortune. And those victim blaming, victim shaming myths are things that are kind of in that format as well, that prevent people from stepping up, prevent people from reporting, and allow this cycle of violence to continue. So it's really important that as we go through this, we're going to talk about looking into our own implicit biases and unconscious biases, so we know not to make that assumption. Nobody deserves to be harmed. Nobody deserves to be violated in any way, shape, or form. And there's nothing that could substantiate that kind of claim in our brain. So it's really important that we kind of evaluate those things that are going on in our brain that might cause us to think that. And the last bit for that is the peer influence. So as with any other social behaviors, the influence of your peers may make it less likely to intervene. But at the same time, the influence of your peers who do step up and do say something when they see something that is incorrect is what we want to kind of like capitalize on. So we want people to make these moves and to intervene safely, so they see, other people see that, and other people feel comfortable doing it. And we now have this positive like intervention steamrolling. It's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So in order to create a safer bar or restaurant, staff and patrons have to speak up when things don't seem right. Even if this means challenging social norms, like an aggressor's belief that an interaction should be private, or your thought, something that might have been embedded into your brain from the way you were brought up, that something is to remain private, that you're not to interfere in other people's things. But bystander intervention is a proven approach. It's a proven approach to sexual assault prevention. It recognizes the importance of shifting existing social norms so that there is social pressure to do or say something as opposed to nothing at all. So those are all really important things. So before we get to the next slide, I just want to reiterate that this is where I start to get into some additional heavy topics. I'm about to give you some research of the prevalence of sexual violence. So if you need to take a moment to step away from the program, please go ahead and feel free to do so. I want to make sure everybody feels comfortable here. And with that, I feel like that's enough time. Dave, if you would like to switch to the next slide. Perfect. Okay. So prevalence of sexual aggression. Sexual aggression, sexual violence is a widespread critical issue. A current research, and our program gets it from a multitude of different avenues. If anybody is interested in finding out where this specific research comes from, please feel free to reach out to me if you want to pop up my email in the chat at any point in time. So research has shown that 81% of women and 43% of men experiencing harassment or assault will experience harassment or assault at least once in their life. 66% of women and 19% of men have been harassed in a public space. And specifically when we're going to the bar industry, 66% of women and 44% of men who work in bars and restaurants have been harassed at work. Another thing that's really important as we go into when do we step up, how do we know to step up, it's important to note that 90% of the attacks on women and 50% of attacks on men are by people they know. So acquaintances, family members, romantic partners, exes, anything of that like. So just because you see people walk in together to your establishment doesn't mean that everything is going to be hunky-dory the entire time, right? And it's also really important to note that this data all is insufficient for non-binary people. It's also likely low reporting numbers because people don't feel comfortable reporting these things. So while this is the data that we have, the numbers are probably pretty different, and it's really, really vital that we start to have more research come up for people who are in the non-binary category. It's also super important, and to backtrack a little bit, you might hear, I'm trying to use as much non-gendered language when I talk about the actual statistics that are available on the screen for you right now. I do that. I do try to keep it as non-gendered as possible, but the reality of sexual violence is that most acts are committed by men against people who identify as LGBTQIA, woman, something else other than white male, white cishet male. So it's super important that I am trying to stay as non-gendered in my language of this, but the data is often reflecting, the data and the words that I say sometimes will reflect what the actual statistics show. Could find out a way better way to say that, sorry. And if you want to go to the next slide, perfect. So all marginalized people are at a greater risk for both sexual harassment and assault, including people of color, low-income people, people who are LGBTQIA, people without housing, people who are differently able. All right, this is super, super important. Research also shows us that lesbians and gay men have levels of abuse in relationships that are equal to or higher than that of people in heterosexual relationships. Bisexual women have higher levels than straight women or lesbians, and people of color, trans people, especially trans women of color, youth, bisexuals, indigenous people, and undocumented people experience higher levels of sexual violence and abuse in relationships than the US average. So this is really heavy information, and I don't mean to do it as a shock and awe, but it is important for us to understand just how prevalent and how widespread of an issue this is, and why it's so important for us, people on the front lines of hospitality, to recognize our ability to intervene before things get to that violent or aggressive act. It's important for us to know these things so we can be aware and recognize problems early on. And because we had mentioned in the previous slide that 90% of sexual assaults is done by people that we know, done by people that the targets know, it's really important for us to keep an eye on things where it seems like somebody's coming in as a date, or even if you don't think something is a date, but people have come in together, we've still got to keep our eyes on those things, okay? And now the next big one, the only other time in which I'm going to really read off of a slide, because there is a very interesting link between alcohol and sexual aggression. Alcohol plays a role in 1 out of 2 sexually violent acts, but it's not because alcohol causes that sexual assault. And I will say this over and over again, and I will rather rinse repeat once again, that it is really important that we know that it's used as a weapon to incapacitate targets and as an excuse and or camouflage for an aggressor's behavior. So they'll say that I was drunk, so I didn't know what I was doing, or they were drunk, so it doesn't matter. We were both just drunk. That's never the case. Alcohol doesn't cause any kind of sexual assault. There is absolutely a risk factor associated with alcohol and sexual assault, but it is a result of aggressors using alcohol to deliberately incapacitate targets and to help justify or excuse their own behavior. And we also avoid saying things like that alcohol makes people vulnerable to sexual assault, as that lends itself to those victim blaming narratives that we're trying to steer away from, the things that prevent us from stepping up, the things that prevent us from reporting when something has happened to us. That's not the case here at all. A person can get as drunk as they want to, and no assault will occur if an aggressor is not present to do it. That's the most point blank thing that I can say. So you should be able to drink. You should be able to do what you want. You should be able to do so without being violated. And it's super important that we, again, say this over and over again. Alcohol does not cause sexual assault. Never has, never will. So what we can take with that information is knowing that if someone is drinking and having a good time, if they're drinking, Joe, do you think that they necessarily have the capacity to consent to anything that's going on?
No. In fact, I was just talking about this with someone. And they were like, I learned some things. If you are too drunk to drive, You are too drunk to consent.
Mm-hmm.
You can also rescind consent. It is not once the door is open, it's open forever. No, you can say, you know what? This doesn't work for me. Can we not do this? You don't owe anyone anything, and you do not have the right to continue doing what you're doing once someone removes consent.
Yep. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. And I promise everybody that's watching us right now, we did not pre-plan this at all.
No,
but
not
that
at all.
is 1,000% correct. Consent is the name of the game here. Consent can be given or taken away in an instant. No is a complete sentence. All of these things are very important for us to understand. So your guest can stay at your bar if they're not causing any kind of disruption. If they want to stay there and drink and they're not going to drive home or harm themselves, they can continue to do that if it works within your policy and your guidelines of your work. But it does not mean that that person gets to talk to them a certain way or touch them or anything like that because they're drinking. Your person may be drinking at the bar, but that might be our cue to recognize that they might not be able to consent to something that's happening. So that's where we can pay a little bit more attention to something. It's about providing that safe and hospitable place and space for anybody that comes into our bars and restaurants. Thank you for the tag team there. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
So what does sexual aggression look like? So too often we mistake sexual aggression for normal behavior. And that's a lot of times because people do come in together. We also just tend to ignore our gut feeling, whether you're not entirely in tune with your body and what it's trying to tell you, or you hear it, but you're afraid of making a fuss, making a stink, causing a scene, anything like that. That is generally a reason why we don't end up stepping up. So it's important for us to look at what sexual aggression might look like. So it could start off as normal date-like behavior. There could be consent going through until there is not consent, and that's rescinded, and then that then becomes unwanted touching, unwanted conversation, unwanted whatever. The thing is, the word unwanted is on par with not consented to, right? So we might find it harder to perceive aggression or a problem or get involved if the aggressor and the target, and as something I should have talked about a little bit earlier, like when I'm referring to aggressor, it's the person who is committing an act that is unwanted. When I'm talking about a target, that is a person who is having those unwanted advances come to them. We try to refrain from using the term a victim because people identify themselves in a multitude of ways. Whether you're a survivor, like I'm a survivor, I don't consider myself a victim in any way, shape, or form. So it's important for me in that language for me to retain my agency. So I'm not going to call anybody a victim in this situation. Okay. So when we're looking at behavior that comes through, we have to stay in check with our gut. We have to listen to what's going on. We have to watch the global picture of how the scene's unfolded. Did two people walk in together and everything was fine and now something is not fine? Well, then I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to listen. I'm going to come by and put an extra glass of water down just so I can peep and hear what's going on. I'm going to be on alert at that point in time once I see something feels or looks wrong, right? Since the majority of sexual violence is committed by someone that a target knows, recognizing aggressive behaviors between people who come in together is super important. So what does it look like? I've said that a bunch of times now. So what does it look like? It could be unwanting touching, leering, staring, persisting after saying no. The moment that you hear a guest say no to something, that should be your little like sonar come on at all points. And you're like, I'm watching this like a hawk. What was that no for? Is the person buying shots for somebody that they did not ask for? That's our opportunity to intervene. Anytime somebody comes up and asks me for a shot for somebody else, if that person is not with them, it's not happening. And that's my personal preference. That is something that I stand by as a bartender. You might have different feelings of how you like to do it. Maybe you like to ask that person if they want that shot. That's also totally okay. It's being aware of those kind of things, smaller things, unwanted touching, unsolicited pictures. Is somebody like texting right next to each other? Are they getting pictures that they don't want to receive? Is there verbal harassment? Are you hearing homophobic, transphobic, biphobic comments? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? Is a person pushing away from the person that they're sitting next to? Are they leaning in closer as if they want to be close to them? Those are all really, really important things to pay attention to, body language and facial expressions. When I talk about channeling into your implicit or unconscious biases, this means looking at the people who came into your bar and evaluating. I'm so sorry that if you can hear my text messages going off right now. I'm so sorry.
I didn't hear it.
Fantastic. Can you distinguish what the relationship is with those people that came in? No, you don't know them. You don't know their names. You don't know how they identify. You don't know if they're on a date. You don't know any of these things. So we need to question our unconscious biases when, if I am a person working at a bar and I assume that there are two heterosexual women that walk into my bar, that, you know, are they any of those things that I just said? Like, the assumption problem is a problem. We can't just assume that people might not be on a date because they appear to be a same-sex group. That doesn't automatically mean that they're friends. They very much could be on a date. You can't make assumptions about a person's sexual orientation, their gender, their anything when they come into your bar. You treat them like a human being and you pay attention to the entire situation. So if you have not already considered questioning your privilege and questioning the unconscious biases that you have, that might be a good opportunity to do so. And it's not to say that this is a thing that we all have to do. This is an important thing for us to grow, is to challenge the things that we might perceive as normal or not normal, big old air quotes on normal anyways, and really reevaluate the entire picture that is presented in front of us. So yes, those things. Let's go talk a little bit about some of those explicit examples of how you might intervene. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about challenging those biases and all that fun stuff in a moment. So let's go on to the next slide. And we're going to talk about the 3 Ds and an R. So when we go into establishments and we train them for safe bars, we talk about these particular intervention strategies: direct, distract, and delegate. Those are the primary ones. Responsiveness has to deal with, what do you do when someone tells you that they have experienced something that made them uncomfortable, something that made them upset? How are you going to respond? When we're talking about the specific intervention strategies, direct means that you're acknowledging something might be going on. So I see you, I recognize something's happening, and I'm going to place myself in this situation. You might not have been able to guess, but I'm very good at direct. Something I figure you might be as well, Joe.
Oh God. So we came back from camp, couldn't take off for Pride weekend because it was right after camp. And I was like wandering through, like doing a lap of the bar floor, restaurant floor. And I walked past the table and this guy was like, blah, 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 no homo. And I don't know what happened, but my head just snapped, my voice dropped, and I just said, not cool. And it was like the voice of God came out of me and the whole building went quiet. And I was just like, oops. But I was like, no, not at all. Not on this day of Pride. No, you don't get to do that. So I'm very direct. Very direct.
And you know what? That was a simple thing. Not cool. Very simple statement that you can make with the aggressor that goes and says exactly what you mean. The other 2 tactics, which a lot of people tend to find more comfort stepping in this route, is either by distraction or delegation. Distraction is a way of redirecting the energy. Sometimes I give the example when I'm doing these classes for safe bars, I walk in and I like pretend to hold a birthday cake and sing happy birthday and come out to a table that looks like they are fighting and they just stare at me like I'm crazy because it's a distraction. It's totally redirecting the energy. And delegation means involving someone else who's in a better position than you. So let's go ahead to the next slide. And each of these responses, the direct, distract, and delegate, can be done with both the target and the aggressor. When it comes to the target, a direct intervention is, how's your night going? Are you okay? Who are you here with? Things that, even though I'm saying them in a very goofy manner right now, are part of your normal dialogue when you are working every single day. So direct doesn't have to be as scary as it might be made out to be. Tone, inflection, all of those things help to convey the message that you're trying to send to the people that you're talking with. And this can be very simple. Joe, how's your night going?
You know, it's great. Or I'm stressed out.
There you go. That's it. You're listening for the response. You deliver it in such a way that presents that you are caring, understanding, but really, I'm here. I'm present. I'm with you. I'm asking you this question. With the aggressor, the same thing. Just what you said, that's not cool. Not okay. That kind of behavior is not allowed here. Leave them alone or you'll have to leave, because how many times have you seen somebody, an aggressor, come up to a party of people or a group of people who might be brunching or lunching or whatever, and they're like, let me buy you some drinks. Let me do this. Let me just annoy the hell out of you. So these things don't have to be in such a like instigative tone or anything like that. You can say it calmly, clearly, directly, and still express the same thing that the same notion that you're trying to get across. So this is direct. Direct does not have to be scary, but here's some other ways to like get more comfortable with direct. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Distract. So distract, have fun with it. You know, when you're talking to the target, a great way to distract, not only are you redirecting the energy, but you can also move them away from the person that might be aggressing upon them, so you can check and see how they're doing. So the distract is an opportunity for you to get yourself into the situation and then be able to ask follow-up questions as well. So when it comes to the target, you could say things like, oh, hey, the bathroom just opened up for you. Let me show you where it is. That way you all are able to step to the side. Hey, are you okay? Is something going on? Is this person bothering you? Oh, an incredible table just opened up for you. Come on over this way. Or a phone call just came from you at the host stand. That one might not be as easy, but if the person doesn't carry a phone or something like that, that could be something to use. But it could be the like, hey, didn't we go to high school together? That's an incredible talk. Holy crap, where'd you get those sequins? I love this. With the aggressor, same thing. These can all kind of be used interchangeably. It's really about establishing building the repertoire in your own like toolbox of things that you'd like to say or are normal for you to say that you can kind of use on a regular basis. With the aggressor, it could be, hey, there's a problem with your credit card. Do you mind stepping over here with me for just a second? Your friends are looking for you. Oh my gosh, where do you work out? That one's, so that one's funny because when we were training, Chelsea Gregoire, who is a presenter and a wonderful human being, Chelsea and I were training in the same class, and being that they know me very well, distracted me by saying like, how much do you deadlift? And I'm like, son of a good one. And they totally got me, right? So Chelsea was very astute in that. So you can use the distract to your advantage as well. Moving on to delegation. The important thing to note about delegating doesn't mean that you have to go to somebody that's in a position of authority. Delegating could be someone who is better equipped. So Joe and I are working behind bakery bar. It would be an honor. So we're working together on the same shift, and I am struggling to connect with the particular guest that I have at the bar, and Joe has more patience than I do. So I'm tagging in Joe to come in. Let's just say in this dream scenario, you have way more patience. But that could be a delegation. It's tagging in your coworker who, you know, another coworker of mine that I've worked with on and off for years. Like, that person is a drunk whisperer. They can talk any person who is overserved off of the point of being frustrated or angry and makes friends with them. And like, so that would be my go-to person when I have a person who might not be recognizing that I'm trying to give them water, stop serving them. And so I could do that. It could be still bouncers, coworkers. Use the friends of the people. So the friends of the target or the friends of the aggressor, like, hey, could you come get your pal here? They're being kind of extra. Get them out.
We get them some fresh air for a minute.
Yeah. Why don't you all go get fresh air? Or, hey, who are you here with? Or, hey, are you these people's friends? Let's come on over here and get your pal who you have left by themselves right now in non-solidarity, which frustrates me. But that's a whole nother story in and of itself. No matter what you choose to do, what type of tactic you go through, remember that it's not confrontational. You are doing your job as a hospitality, like, wonder sorcerer and doing just more of that. You're checking in on your guests. You're taking care of them. You're making sure they're okay. And you're making sure that they are set up to have the best possible night in your establishment, right? So whatever you choose to do it calmly, clearly, use good body language, standing upright, you're not being aggressive, you're being assertive, and you can repeat as necessary. You make eye contact, obviously, and also if we're still like very much in mask land right now, eye contact's important. I have incredibly emotive eyes, so this works out wonderfully for me. But if you're not, hand gestures are fantastic too. So like, thank you so much for being here. I think it's time for you to go. Thank you so much for being here. Did you come with somebody? Hey, do you mind coming over here? And we're gonna get your credit card situation evaluated. So feel free to use body language that squares up or stands slightly to the side so you don't have to like come. This could be aggressive. This is less aggressive. Eye contact is fantastic. Assertive tones, assertive postures, hand gestures are awesome. All of these things will help you. And let's go to the last one, not the last one, but for R. So responsiveness. What do you do when someone comes up to you and says, Joe, this person just like grabbed my leg and I didn't like it?
My personal response is, I'm sorry that happened. How can I help you? Or
brilliant. That's perfect. That is perfect. You are establishing empathy. You're working, building into your rapport. You're establishing empathy. You are showing that you believe the person. And if it comes up and it is helpful, you're asking clarifying questions. You guided them in that next part is, how can I help you? Not, let me call this person, let me get my manager, let me do this. It is super important for you to ask them what they need to feel safe, to feel better. Let them, whenever possible, try to steer the course of action for the remainder of the time with you. And the reason why that is, the next word is agency. If someone has been violated in some way, whether it's through verbal or physical harassment, they've had their agency challenged. They have had some person who thinks that they are in a position of power higher than them try to place harm upon them or exert their power on them. So the last thing you want to do is try to steer away that moment or drive it further into the ground that they have no agency in this case. You're asking them how they would like to establish care for the remainder of the night. How can I best help you right now? Is there someone if they're not able to communicate with you, you can ask if there's someone you would like me to call. Anything that helps show that you are here to help them. Lots of research has shown that the immediate interaction that a person has after they have been harmed in some capacity, the reaction or the interaction that they have with the person after that kind of makes or breaks their instance of whether they're going to have PTSD, their ability to recover from the situation. So if someone who is definitely not Joe were to be like, what do you want me to do about it? That could absolutely destroy somebody. And that is not an uncommon thing that has been done in the past, which has caused a lot of people further harm in their processing of the situation. So it's really important that we, you are a bartender, you are a guide for the night, you are that person that can really help put them on the right path to recovery as well, just by simply being empathetic and showing that you are caring, you believe them, and you would like to help them in the way that works for them, right? So really important things like that. And then no matter what they decide to do, you want to stay with them throughout the course of the night. Or if you absolutely need to tag somebody else in, you're going to get their approval to switch out whom it might be, like if it's one of their friends. But you stay with them so they don't potentially get put in the position again where they see their harasser or their aggressor again. All right, so we've gone through a lot of the really heavy stuff. So now we're going to talk about, really briefly, things to consider before you go forth and decide on one of these tactics to take, these bystander intervention skills. Again, I said it beforehand, your personal safety is key. If you don't feel comfortable stepping into a situation, you do not need to, especially if there's a weapon involved, if there's anything like that, if there's like a melee on the bar floor, you don't need to necessarily go put yourself into the situation where you're going to put yourself in even more harm, right? So your mask, your safety mask on first, and then you help the next person. Your values and ethics come into play as well. Strategies that work for you, whether it's direct, distract, delegate. The law is important. I will say that Safe Bars discourages bars and restaurants from calling the police unless it's an absolute last effort. Be in tune to what your environment is and what your relationship with the law is in your particular area. There was a community out in Colorado that I was training a few months ago that has an incredible relationship with their law enforcement. And that's because it's a resort town. And they felt super comfortable about talking to their people because they're trained in de-escalation and that's their first go-to. So that felt right for them. But if it's not right for your bar, your restaurant, your anything, don't do that. And especially if somebody has come to you saying that something's going on, don't immediately offer to call the police. You don't know what their relationship is with the law. We don't want to exacerbate that situation in any way, shape, or form. So just as a heads up, we discourage from calling the police unless it's absolutely necessary and if it's something that your workplace guidelines kind of call for. And then workplace guidelines are really important. And we can kind of transition into the next slide after that because it's super, super important. So how else? So not taking off our Safe Bars lens, but now let's have a discussion about how can we create welcoming spaces in our establishments all the time. We can go to the next slide. Is that the first one? Yes. Okay. Gender inclusive language. What a novel idea. Gender inclusive language for everybody. And notice that it's not saying gender neutral. There's no neutrality in this thing. It's inclusive. You use gender language that works for the people that are in your establishment. You use gender inclusive language for your staff, for your guests, on your menu. And when we talk about gender inclusive language, that means using pronouns and respecting pronouns. It's becoming more habitual for me to introduce myself and say that I use the she, her pronouns. And it is great for me to do that because it encourages other people to do that. And when I say my pronouns, then you might say your pronouns, and then I know how you prefer to be spoken about. When we talk about pronouns, pronouns are how we refer to somebody when they're not in the room. So, where is Joe? He is in his pool. Where is Joe? He's in the back of bakery bar right now, right?
Yeah.
No matter what pronoun a person uses, you respect that. But we have to have the conversation with people about what pronouns we prefer. So you can set that expectation within your work guidelines. You could, if people are wearing name tags, you can put that on there. You can include it in your menu if you wanted to. There's a lot of different ways in which you can do inclusive language. When it comes to guests, Joe, how do you greet your guests when they walk into the bar?
Hey, y'all, because I live in the South now, so I use y'all.
So if you are you're from Milwaukee?
Yes.
Okay, so what was it before you moved to the South?
Oh my God, super Midwestern. Hey, guys. Oh, guys. Oh, God, guys. So, and that was something I had to really fight in myself because that was the language I was taught. That's what I grew up, but I realized that's very limiting.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just say, hey, y'all, or hey, everybody, or just welcome.
Welcome. Hey, friends. Hey, pals. Hey, y'all. Hey, party people. If you're from Baltimore, we say, hey, hun, and that's got to be kept in that particular area because people will not recognize that outside of Baltimore.
I have been using angel. How are you angels doing?
Yep. There are literally 1,000 things that you can say or just not say at all to make people, hey, folks, yep, absolutely. Yes, BP Dub. Absolutely. There are so many things besides, hey, you guys, that is more inclusive to everybody that's there. There's no point in using that part. And yes, it might be difficult because we are, we're not 10 years old and we're not still learning pronouns and nouns and learning how to talk about things in school, but it's not that difficult. It is a matter of either dropping off a word, which is, hey, instead of hey guys, or you substitute it with something else. It is a welcome gesture that shows people that you respect them, you're welcoming them to your space and your home, and that you're not an a-hole. On your menus. Okay, so on your menus, I want to pair this with gendering drinks. Tell me your feelings on that.
I get really frustrated when we've all had someone send a drink back like, this coupe, I need a manly glass. And I'm just like,
there is no gender in inanimate objects. There is no gender in a glassware. There's no gender in color. There's no gender in a drink. A drink is a drink. It's delicious. Put it in my face in whatever vessel you have decided feels great for it. For those people who might feel some kind of way about not wanting a certain drink or something like that, why do you feel that way? Think about and challenge what's making you feel so uncomfortable about holding a coupe or holding a martini glass. What do you like? These glasses are designed for us to have aromatic experiences with, not for you to say, here's your dude drink, here's your girl drink. It's just stupid.
It's so
very stupid, right? So if you are still in that kind of archaic world in which you are gendering your drinks, I would encourage you to reevaluate what you're doing and maybe try to err on the side of something that's more inclusive. When you are creating menus, you don't need to necessarily think about whether you're gendering the name of a cocktail. Does it have to have the name does it have to have a woman's name or a man's name associated with it? Does it have to be that way? Are there better ways to do it? Things to consider, because I could go on for a long time about this. So one of my most favorite things to have done was create a Nickelodeon menu and a John Waters menu, just because that was the entire movie collection from that.
Oh yeah.
So think about different ways in which, if you want to make something fun, but fun doesn't have to Inside jokes from the production studio. Reconsider why you're gendering things. Things can still be very fun without assigning a gender. Drinks don't have gender. Glassware doesn't have gender. It's just silly. I put restrooms on here because I know that it's very unique per bar situation. When people have the option of single stall spaces, it's pretty easy to take your signs down and say all genders, or even put go ahead.
Exactly what we did at Bakery Bar. We have just 2 rooms that have a single toilet each. And people are like, well, which one do I use? I'm like, it's a single seater. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's a single seater. So, and I do recognize and want to be conscientious that people who have bathrooms that are multiple stalls, it can be difficult, and it's also quite costly to, you can't just, not everybody has rough in to create an entirely new bathroom. So I do understand and recognize that there are financial restrictions in terms of being able to do that, but evaluate your spaces, evaluate your bathrooms. Does it have to have the particular language that you are putting on the door that could potentially make people feel unwelcomed or unsafe, for that matter? So consider what you can do with your bathrooms. Then we get into setting expectations. Whether you are a bar manager, a bar owner, whatever it might be, setting proper expectations for the people in your establishments is incredible. So that starts with workplace handbooks and guidelines, and letting people know that, like, if you see something, you can say something. If you report something, you'll be supported. If you intervene, you'll be supported. If you have anonymous reporting within your business, that's even better, because even if you happen to be an establishment that has an HR department, HR works for the company, right? So think about how you can set up anonymous reporting systems for your people, and putting into place in the beginning of what kind of behavior is acceptable or not. Right? So starting from the top down is really important. Leading by example as a manager, as an owner, super important. If you are an establishment that has to have uniform requirements, think about the verbiage that you're using in there. How can we avoid perpetuating stereotypes? Can you just say, wear this color, or wear your hair back, or limit the amount of makeup? That way it's inclusive for everybody. Like, if you're saying that you don't want a lot of makeup on, make it for everybody, because a lot of people like to wear makeup. And if you're saying that you need hair pulled out of your face, which, duh, we're in a food establishment, that's fine. Just say all hair needs to be out of the face. That way anybody who likes to wear long hair or whatever kind of hair knows that that applies to all of them. Uniform requirements are very frustrating to me. I understand some spaces still like to use them, but see if you can avoid putting people in, vests and things that don't feel right to them, and make them feel like they're not in the right work clothes or space or anything like that. I've had personally negative experiences with workplace uniforms, and I did not like it very much. And I can imagine being just me and my discomfort, and I'm the least important person in this situation, right? Training, education, emotional literacy, all of this stuff that we're talking about today, and I am so sorry because I can talk forever, and obviously we're going over on time, but all of this is super important, and it takes the community to consistently talk about these things in order for us to make a change. We have to understand why this is important. We have to understand why honoring people in the way that they want to be identified and express themselves is important. We can't take away people's who they are. We absolutely cannot do that. And then finding brand partners that share your values. I think we've been able to see a lot especially within the last couple of years, of different brands that we have found support our mission and support our values and are aligned with the things. Yeah, there you go. Perfect pop-up right there. Like, we find companies that align with our mission and our values and our ethics, and we stick with them. And if there are people that do not align with your values, do not bring them into your bars, because people, and when I say people, I mean brands, because if you're bringing in brands that don't align with your values, that sets the wrong expectation for everybody in your space, right? And the last thing I want to talk about, which I think is super important, and I will see if there's any questions, and since I've gone on so far, is allyship. So allyship is incredibly important. Allyship is something that you do, something that you take action on. It is something that you have to actively work at. And it's not something that it's not your identity. You don't get to identify as an ally. Ally is an active piece of work that people do. And if you're going to be an ally to the LGBTQIA community, to anybody that's coming into your establishment, you need to educate yourself. It is not the responsibility of people who identify differently than you are to educate you. Repeat that again. It is not the responsibility of an LGBTQIA, BIPOC, whatever human. It's not their responsibility to educate you on what it's like to be them. Okay, so we'll let that marinate for a half second, go from there. If you are a person who is not in the LGBTQIA community, you need to understand your privilege and challenge unconscious biases. Think about why you feel apprehensive about holding a coupe for a cocktail. Think about why you assume that two people walking into the bar have to be women and have to be friends and have to be this and have to be that. Challenge your assumptions, okay? And when it comes to inviting people into your space, whether they're going to become staff or whether they're guests in your establishment, you respect them. You respect people's bodies, boundaries, and spaces. Nobody is obligated to come out to you. Nobody is obligated to share their relationship status. Nobody is obligated to tell you anything when you are coworkers, when you're staff and patron. Like it's not a requirement. There is no necessary engagement of that. So you respect people, and if they want to tell you something, that's great. And if they do, then don't screw it up by asking invasive questions. And a great way to be an ally is to call out homophobic, transphobic, biphobic language. Anything that you hear or see that is incorrect and not acceptable, call it out. When you call it out, other people see you call it out, and then that starts a positive chain reaction of like, oh no, that's bad behavior. We don't like bad behavior. Let's call that out. People start to recognize that something is wrong with the situation when you step up and say something and you support people who are in this community. Use correct pronouns. I've repeated that multiple times, and preferred names. And take responsibility when you mess up. We are all fallible human beings. We screw up. That is fine. Apologize, say you're going to do better, move on. When you dwell on if you call somebody by the wrong pronoun, if you use a dead name, if you do that, say you're sorry, move on, and work on it on your own. When you dwell on things, you're putting your burden on somebody else that does not deserve it in any way, shape, or form. These are all very important things to know. So again, allyship is something that you do, not something that you are. It requires action. It requires conscientious work. And yeah. So in general, what I'm here to say is it's not actually that difficult to create safe spaces for your in your bars. And I don't want to say like we're creating safe. Obviously, safety has a continuum, and we're trying to make sure that we're creating the most welcoming, hospitable, least harm causing spaces that we possibly can. But it can be done. It's not super, super difficult. We just have to put a little action into it. It's a community effort. Share this information. Share your best practices. Is there anything else like I haven't talked about that you all have done at Bakery Bar that, or honestly, other establishments?
We're pretty much covering what we went through, which is, it's always reaffirming to see. Um, I want to take this time to thank you, Amie, for the amazing work you just did for all of us. Thank you. I'd like to give a big shout out to Dave, who has been behind the scenes keeping us running. Thank you, Dave Lanzalone. I really just want to say thank you to the audience. I know this is a lot of heavy information to process, but we really appreciate you being here and working through it with us. I'm Joe the iGay on Instagram. I post random photos. They're real spicy lately. I've been feeling myself.
I like it. It's good.
It's,
You make me happy.
That's all I really want for people. I just want to say, if you enjoyed this class, please hit like or love. Show some love in our comments. If you want to see more classes like this, you should follow Portland Cocktail Week on Facebook or YouTube. There are so many great classes from the past. They're all recorded. They're saved there. You're not going to miss a class if you don't see it when it's live, because you can always go back and watch it again. And also, we're posting these videos on the YouTube for people who aren't on Facebook, because we understand Facebook is the Facebook. And you can go to youtube.com/PDXCW. Just also on Instagram, all the socials. You can always find out what's coming up next. I've been Joe.
I've been Amie. I'm sorry. I never get to not host. This is like, what do I do?
Big thanks to Shandon and Moe USA for sponsoring this. Always remember to enjoy responsibly and just go forth and live great lives, you beautiful humans. We adore you.
Yes. Thank you.